We got a rave review from Ajit, who passed his TExES 231 ELAR exam. He told us that choosing 240 was the best thing he did. And I'm feeling greedy. I want to help even more teachers pass that test and get a couple more reviews like Ajit's. Hey, I'm Emma. I spent many years teaching in the classroom, and now I work with 240 to help teachers pass their certification exams. This video is going to prepare you for the TExES English Language Arts and Reading 7 through 12 exam. That's a mouthful. We can call it ELAR for short. And this video is going to cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts that you'll need to know, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. Let's think of this like a great book we can't wait to read. Now that we've cracked the cover, let's take a look at our table of contents to get an even better idea of what to expect. The TExES ELAR 7 through 12 is made up of 4 domains, which are the big areas. Each one has 2 to 4 competencies nestled under it. You'll need to answer 100 selected response questions and 2 constructed response questions. We'll call those SRQs and CRQs for short. A CRQ is like an essay. Now, writing essays on the spot for your exam might make you nervous. Or you might be thinking, essays? No big deal. I want to teach secondary English. But either way, we have you covered. Stick around because we'll show you exactly what to expect and how to prepare for your CRQs a little later. For now, let's dive into our domains. Each domain is worth a certain percentage of your exam. Let's start with Domain 2, since it's worth the largest chunk at 40%. Domain 2 covers reading processes, skills and strategies for tackling non-literary text, literary elements, genres and movements, and strategies for reading literary texts. Oh, and you're going to need to know how to teach those concepts to students as well. If you're thinking, that's a lot, you're absolutely right. It should put your mind at ease, though, to know that we have all of this covered for you in our 240 study guide. The link is below. But for now, let's go over a key concept that's bound to come up for this portion of your exam: literary devices. Literary devices encompass a wide range of stylistic tools authors use to convey meaning to the reader. You might also see them referred to as figurative language. Examples of literary devices are metaphor, simile, analogy, imagery, alliteration, personification, repetition, onomatopoeia, and hyperbole. And depending on the text, the devices could even expand beyond this list. On the test, you'll likely be given a passage and asked how the author used a particular literary device, or which device they used in a particular sentence. Here's a tip. Ask yourself, how is this excerpt enriched with the inclusion of this device? Think about the meaning and intent behind why the author included that literary device. Be sure to stick around until the practice questions portion of this video, because I've got a question lined up that'll help you practice identifying literary devices. Now, this is the part when I'm supposed to move on to the next domain. But since this is the biggest one, I want to give you one more piece of information as a little bonus. You might see some questions about literary movements or literary periods. There are quite a few of them, and you'll need to be familiar with their characteristics. Of course, the 240 study guide has you covered with explanations and examples of works from each movement and period. But let's talk about one big one very quickly: Romanticism. Romanticism. It's exactly what you would expect. It was a literary movement that championed nature, romantic love, the individual, and the imagination. Romanticism shifted the focus of literature from society and its demands to the feelings of the individual. Works from this movement include lyrical ballads by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and perhaps surprisingly, Frankenstein, which is associated with Romanticism, but does mix in some horror and mystery. Okay, now let's turn the page and dig into our next domain, written communication, which is worth the second biggest chunk of your exam at 30%. The written communication domain covers writing as a process and writing effectively in a variety of forms. And again, you'll have to know how to teach these things too. In fact, on your exam, you'll see questions that ask you to look at a piece of student writing and choose the best way to improve it. Let's dive even deeper into this. So when you're determining the best way to revise a piece of student writing, we've got some guiding questions you can ask yourself. If the question is asking about the organization of the piece, check if the writer used transition words and consider whether the sentences are in the best order. To revise clarity or word choice, look for what needs to be added or removed. Or a word may need to be substituted for a different one to convey the desired meaning or mood. When evaluating author's purpose, think of ways to make the purpose clear and consistent. Often, a thesis statement is the key here. When asked about audience, consider the writer's tone, as well as the level of words used or the presence of any slang or specific jargon. Look, questions about writing can be tricky. Let's dive into the study guide to see a video snippet with a great tip.
Questions about writing may be tricky for the test taker because evaluating writing can be subjective. What sounds clear to you may not be the most concise phrasing according to the test. The nuances of the English language come into play when evaluating writing. So what can you do about it? Look for the answer that best demonstrates the skill or topic in question.
We've made it through our two biggest domains, but we can't just skim the next two. They're each worth 15% of your exam, so that makes up a significant chunk. Let's just back up to Domain 1, and then we'll finish this portion out with Domain 4. Domain 1 will assess your knowledge of relationships between language arts and other aspects of students' lives, teaching language arts to diverse student populations, and the structure and development of the English language. At this point, it probably doesn't surprise you that this domain covers a lot. But for now, let's highlight a key concept. English learners progress through sequential stages of language proficiency. They are beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. When teaching at the secondary level, you could have students at any of those stages of language proficiency. And they move through those stages in each of the 4 language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. While these 4 domains are interrelated, students' proficiency in each can develop at different rates. On your exam, you may be asked to choose the best strategy or support for a student at a particular stage of language proficiency. So let's go over some recommended supports for students in each stage. In this video, we'll talk about the writing domain. But for recommended strategies within the other 3 domains, be sure to check out the 240 study guide. We break down all the information you need. So to support students at the beginning proficiency level in writing, you can have them label items, create lists, and copy words or phrases. You can also allow drawing to express things that they're not yet able to communicate with written words. These strategies are appropriate because students at this level are likely only able to write in short, simple sentences, and they may make frequent errors. As students move to the intermediate level of language proficiency in writing, they will still make errors, but they can use high-frequency vocabulary. Their writing will likely consist of loosely connected text, few cohesive devices, repetition of ideas, and descriptions that lack detail. To help them, teachers can allow students to choose topics that are highly familiar and concrete, and allow students to use high-frequency words. Sentence stems are a great tool that you might see in a question on the exam. Also, a word bank can help students in the intermediate stage. In the advanced stage, students can generally express their ideas in writing and engage meaningfully in content area writing assignments. They'll still make errors occasionally, and they may need support with more challenging topics, but overall, their writing can be understood. Support at this stage often takes the form of graphic organizers or outlines, or the teacher may need to explicitly model the writing task. Finally, at the advanced high stage, students write at a level nearly comparable to native English-speaking peers in clarity and precision. Errors are minor, and they need minimal support. So exposing students to a variety of written texts and using genre analysis will help them continue to develop as writers. You'll have them reading, writing, and, let's be honest, even texting at an advanced high level. All right, let's keep moving and see what Domain 4 is all about. This portion of your exam covers principles of oral communication and developing listening and speaking skills, as well as media literacy. And as usual, a lot of these questions will be asked in a teaching scenario format. But no worries, we'll get some good practice answering this type of question at the end. Right now, let's discuss some concepts that are essential for you to be familiar with. You'll need to understand the different forms of oral communication and how to foster listening and speaking skills in the classroom. I'm going to go over 3 kinds of oral communication. It's possible that a student who excels in one form struggles with another. That's why it's important to provide a variety of experiences in your class. Of course, conversation is one form of oral communication. Students talk to one another, and the talk is facilitated by the teacher. This allows students to practice their active listening and speaking skills as they engage with one another. Group discussions take place when students are allowed to speak amongst themselves on a particular topic. Teachers may circulate and observe the communication skills of individual students in this setting. Some students may not feel comfortable speaking up in a whole class discussion. For these students, you can see if they'd be more willing to contribute in a smaller group discussion, or they may excel at taking notes on key points during the whole group discussion. The last form of oral communication is formal presentations. There are lots of different kinds of presentations, but the big difference here is that the communication is planned ahead of time and presented in a logical manner. We teach students the different ways to prepare, organize, and deliver presentations. Many people think formal presentations are the most intimidating form, but not for everyone. Some students prefer preparing what they will say rather than jumping in during unplanned, informal discussions. While oral communication might seem limited to forms of verbal discourse, active listening is a crucial aspect of oral communication. When students are practicing active listening, they express engagement with what is being said. We can help students develop their active listening skills by teaching them to take notes, analyze a speaker's opinion, and critically engage with a speaker's stance. Kinda like how you can use active listening while watching my video, by taking notes or engaging with it in the comments. Okay, remember those CRQs we touched on earlier? Let's find out what those are all about. Consider this a super helpful supplemental resource in our book. There are 2 CRQs on the English Language Arts and Reading 7 through 12 exam, the Literary Analysis question and the Sample Writing Assessment and Pedagogy question. Let's talk about literary analysis first. You'll be given 2 passages. They can be poems or excerpts from a variety of genres and sources. Then you will write an essay in which you determine the shared theme and explain how the literary elements used by the authors contribute to that theme. Your task is to compare and contrast the texts and dig deep to analyze why the authors use certain literary devices. We recommend spending 60 to 90 minutes on this question. I suggest writing an opening paragraph, which will include the theme, introduction, and a thesis statement, 2 body paragraphs, one for each of the main points you want to make in your discussion, and a concluding paragraph. Here's a tip. When analyzing the devices used by the authors, pay attention to what stands out to you the most when reading, what invokes the most feeling, and any patterns or repetition. Be sure to review the literary devices I talked about back in Domain 2. When determining the theme those literary devices contribute to, it's not enough to just say what the texts were about. You need to determine what the authors are trying to say about the topic. Let me show you what I mean. Here are a few examples of common themes and examples of how to state them at a low level and a high level. Strive for that higher level and you'll set your essay up for success. Now let's talk about the sample writing assessment and pedagogy question. This one requires you to put on your teaching hat. You'll be given a student's response to a writing assignment. Then you will write an essay in which you answer 3 tasks. Identify the student's strength, their weakness, and an instructional activity that you use to target their weakness. When you write your response, you can organize your paragraphs to match those 3 tasks. No introduction or conclusion necessary. You can get right to the point. We recommend spending about 45 to 60 minutes on this question. Here's a tip. Make sure the weakness you identify is significant. That means it impacts the effectiveness of the writing, and there's more than one place that it's evident in the student's response. You know, the best way to prepare for the CRQs is to practice. We don't have time to answer a literary analysis question together, but let's look at a writing assessment and pedagogy question. The 240 study guide has more full-length prompts for you to study with, along with sample responses. Okay, here's our prompt. It's 7th grade, and they're writing personal narratives. Here are the directions for the students. Write a personal narrative about a time when you felt surprised. Be sure to do the following. Engage the reader with your storytelling, including a beginning, middle, and end to your story. Describe the scene using the 5 senses. Tell what you learned from the experience. Here's the student response and those tasks we'll need to answer. You can pause here to read it, then I'm going to show you how I would answer. Okay, let's identify this student's strength. Remember that there's not only one right answer for these, but what stood out to me was the last paragraph. Here, he clearly summed up the lesson he learned. He was able to articulate his thoughts in a mature, logical way. And telling what you learned from the experience was listed in the directions. He did a great job with it, so I'm going to choose that as his strength. Now, let's identify the student's weakness. I noticed that this piece is lacking in description and detail. The directions said, describe the scene using the 5 senses, and I don't see evidence of that here. The only mention of how the party looked was when he said it overlooked a lake and was a nice place. This doesn't give us enough detail to be able to visualize it. And here, he listed who was there, but we don't know what they looked like. He seems to be telling and not showing. Plus, it's his favorite Mexican restaurant, so there's probably lots of smells and tastes to describe. Now, we need to determine what the teacher should do to address that weakness. Again, there's not only one correct answer. You'll just need to make sure that the activity or strategy you choose is specific, and you explain exactly how it would help target the weakness. I'm going to suggest a story description activity based on the 5 senses. It could be a 3-column chart that lists the 5 senses and has students write what they observed, as well as list some adjectives. Now, after you've planned your answers to these tasks, you would write them out in paragraph form, making sure to include evidence and quotations from the student's work to support the strength and weakness. I could talk about the CRQs for hours, but that's all we have time for. If you have a question, drop it in the comments. I'll be watching the comments section and I'm here to help. We've made it to the epilogue. We just covered what to expect for the CRQs, and now we're going to get some practice answering selected response questions. These practice questions will show you how the 4 domains can appear on the test. So let's go back to where we started, Domain 2. Let's take a look at a question about literary devices or figurative language. So, like many questions on the ELAR exam, this one gives us a passage. Of course, you can pause to read it first if you like, but I'm going to go straight to the question. Feel free to read the answer choices too. Which statement best describes Whitman's use of figurative language within the poem? Choice B is best. The narrator's voyage of the soul is as a ship on the waters advancing, making it an example of an extended simile. Next up is Domain 3. Let's check out a question about revising writing. Ooh, here's a type of question you'll see a lot. Which sentence should be removed from this paragraph to maintain clarity and purpose? Sentence 1, 2, 3, or 4? The correct answer is sentence 2. It is the only sentence that does not focus on the bird's habitat, so it should be removed. Domain 3, done. Let's keep it moving. On to Domain 1. The state of Texas requires schools to identify the proficiency levels of ELL students in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Reading an ELL student's writing aloud can help determine whether a student's writing level is beginner, intermediate, advanced, or advanced high. Which of the following would best describe the writing of an ELL student at the intermediate level? Writing flows including details and less repetition, writing feels choppy, or writing is disjointed and difficult to understand. At the intermediate level, writing feels choppy. It's likely made up of short sentences and frequent errors. You made it to the last question. This one is from Domain 4, Oral Communication and Media Literacy. A 7th grade class is participating in reading groups. Each group has been assigned an article to read, and one student was designated as the group discussion leader. The teacher provides the group leader with a list of inferential and evaluative questions to ask the group. In addition to this list of questions, what could the teacher do to ensure that all members of the group are participating in a high-quality group discussion? Provide a list of sentence stems that encourage students to elaborate upon or respond to each other's ideas? Walk around the class, giving students 1 point toward their assignment score every time they speak? Walk around the class listening to student discussions, interjecting teacher responses as a model when relevant? Or give each student 3 tokens to put in the middle when they've spoken, asking that each student use all their tokens by the end of the discussion. Now at first, I thought this was the answer, but the question feedback feature in the 240 study guide shows me why it's not. While modeling is beneficial, it's not the best choice in this scenario because we can't be sure that students are going to use what the teacher modeled after she leaves. So this is the right answer. Responding to or building upon each other's thoughts is an important part of oral communication. By providing sentence starters, the teacher is scaffolding this skill and encouraging students to respond to each other in more detail. And that's it. We've practiced a question from every domain in your exam. Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still plenty more to learn. If you really want to make sure that you're prepared for the TExES English Language Arts and Reading 7 through 12 exam, take the next step and subscribe to the 240 study guide. It has plenty of videos, so you can watch and/or listen while doing chores. It's test aligned, so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has hundreds of practice questions, so you can be sure you're ready. And best of all, it has the money-back guarantee. We know you're ready to write your own story as an English teacher, so click the link below right now to get started.